Hey, listening audience, welcome back to Noggin Notes. I'm your host, Jake Wiskerson, and I'm really excited about this particular interview. I talked to a gal named Gwen Taylor, who is the executive director of ACCEPT. And ACCEPT is an acronym, and it stands for Access for Community and Cultural Education Programs and Training. It sounds like a mouthful, but they started their mission a long time ago to help educate and inspire awareness for people of color, specifically Black people in Northern Nevada and then eventually broader Nevada, about HIV and AIDS. And as Gwen will explain in the interview, there's a big problem as far as disproportionate affliction of HIV and AIDS to minority communities, specifically the African American community, and how they're going to try to get those folks not only aware of what's going on, but into care. I learned a ton. I've talked to Gwen a few times now and her team, and they actually came and gave a training at Zephyr, which is one of our sponsors. As you know, if you've listened to our podcast for a while now, Zephyr Wellness is a local outpatient counseling agency here in Nevada that I co-own. And you can go to zephyrwellness.org and find out more. Also follow us on all the social media stuff and get free content, that helps enhance your life. Hopefully, I'm putting it out there in the idea that, or with the idea, I should say, that people are absorbing this stuff and implementing it into their lives. But they came and gave a training to Zephyr and Zephyr's clinicians so that we can work hand in hand with what Accept is doing with their patients, and we can help those patients recover mentally from this chronic illness. So I'm really excited. And I also need to give a hat tip to our other sponsor. They've been awesome, Audible. If you're not familiar with Audible, go to audibletrial.com/noggin notes. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial, during which period you can download a free audiobook and keep it, even if you decide to cancel your membership. But you probably won't, because most of us enjoy Audible. We like audiobooks. We can Bluetooth them through our mobile devices in our cars and while we're mowing the lawn and all sorts of things. So go to audibletrial.com/noggin notes and get your free 30-day trial. Get access to their really awesome, overwhelmingly impressive library of audio content, and get a free book while you're at it. audibletrial.com/noggin notes. And then if you haven't heard, I also co-host a podcast called Guns and Mental Health. Now, you may not be in a part of the world where guns are important. You may not own guns. You may not care about guns. But guns and mental health, as cultures, have long stood opposed to each other, not really talking. And so our organization, Walk the Talk America, is trying to bridge that gap by pulling people from the fringes back into the center. And our mission is to prevent otherwise preventable incidents of injury and death, what we call negative outcomes associated with irresponsible gun storage, gun ownership, that kind of thing. And then also dealing with suicide, because suicide by firearm is a big deal and it largely goes unaddressed in the gun community. And the flip side of that coin is that the clinical community doesn't know much about guns. So we're trying to pull everybody together. If you go to WTTA.org, or specifically WTTA.org/love, you can take a free and anonymous mental health screening. So there's multiple ways that you can benefit yourself. One, check in your own mental health by going to the website, but also two, download and listen to the podcast that I co-host with WTTA's founder, Michael Sodini. Mike's amazing, and I think we produce a pretty good podcast. There's been a lot of really cool guests, and we have some pretty deep conversations, pretty emotional sometimes, and I think they're really illustrative. I highly encourage you to follow us there and give us a listen if you'd like to. So that's the Guns and Mental Health Podcast. Walk the Talk America is the organization. Zephyr Wellness is our other sponsor that does both. We're just trying to push this stuff out in the community so people get healthy, right? That's the point of all this, is that we want to live among people who are mentally well, and we can avoid all this stuff like, abuse and neglect and violence that come along with not being mentally well. So if we can all learn to love each other a little bit more, and we can do that through promoting free content like this, then we'll make the world a better place. In the meantime, I really hope you enjoy my interview with Gwen Taylor, who leads and runs and founded ACCEPT. here in Reno. And if you're so inspired, maybe you can do the same thing in your own community. I wish you all the very Merry Christmas. I know this is posting on Christmas week of 2020, and have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. Welcome to Gwen Taylor, who is are you the executive director?
Yes.
Accept. And thank you for saying that. How are you this afternoon, ma'am?
Good, Jake. Honored to be here with you. Thank you so much.
The honor's mine. For the listening audience, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more lengthy here in a second, but you run this organization called Accept, and they will have already heard my 2 to 3 minute introduction before this interview. But please tell us what Accept is, and then also like how it came to be, and a little bit about yourself and your background, because you have a fascinating history.
Okay, thank you so much. The history of Accept is my husband was he's still a local pastor in Reno, Nevada. And back in the early 90s, 2 parishioners died from HIV/AIDS related illnesses. And they were members of our church, but no one in the church wanted to tell us that they died of AIDS and HIV related illnesses. So my pastor was very upset because these 2 young men died by themselves. And so he said, can't keep happening. And then on a personal note, my sister married a young man and then found out that he was bisexual. And they finally got a divorce, and he went down to LA and he passed away with full-blown AIDS. And he was, oh my gosh, he was only like maybe 38. 39, probably not even that, but mid-30s. And so that was so devastating. So my husband decided that we needed to do some educational outreach in Reno because people had such stigmas against the disease and, nobody wanting to tell us. And it's just too much. So he decided to start we went to beauty shops, barber shops, churches, different community venues where anyone would hear our talk. And at that time, we were targeting African Americans because back in 95, when we started doing the outreach, nationwide, African Americans accounted for 52% of all the HIV/AIDS cases. And back then, we were like 12% of the population. So even in 2020, Jake, I was just looking over at the new stats. In 2018, of all the new infections, African Americans made up 42% of those. And we are 14% of the population. So the disparities of health is not going down. So by us being such a small part of the population, CDC calls that it's a disproportionate rate of infection. So like you have 76% of white people that live in the United States, but they only accounted for, let me get my little notes here. They accounted for 17% of the new infections. So it's just kind of crazy that this is with African gay and bisexual men, but we were 25%, and then they were 17%. So this is like a subpopulation of the African American community. But overall, we were 37% of all the new cases in 2018. And so things are kind of like 2 years behind. So that's the reason we got started.
And what is it that you do as an organization?
When we began back in 95, we were doing mostly prevention work. We would talk about how you get it, how you don't get it. We would, do prevention work and try to advocate for people wearing condoms and getting, tests for STDs. I think they call them STIs now. But that was that was like from 95 to 99. That's basically what we did. We did prevention work, how not to get it. Well, the government decided in the early 2000s, they figured, well, you know what? We need to reach people that have HIV so they can quit spreading it. So right now, our organization, we do secondary prevention. So we work with people that have HIV and AIDS. We work with them to make sure they stay medically adherent to their medicines. And if they do take their medicines as they are told to take them, they will eventually become what we call undetectable. So our quest right now is to serve people that have HIV, make sure they're undetectable, and then just help them orchestrate their life. We're not a medical facility, but we are non-medical case management. So if they need help with any type of social services, like they need to go to Social Security, get their Social Security cards, if they lost their driver's license, we'll help them with all that, in addition to the services that our funder funds us to do. And I can go into that too in more detail if you'd like.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we try to do here on the show is to not only obviously spread information, but we also want to inspire people and encourage people that not only are programs available, maybe you're not in the local Reno area, that's fine, but hearing a story like yours might spark somebody to go do something in their own community, right? So now I can proudly say that we've officially launched Noggin Notes Africa, and Kiala, who I interviewed on the show several weeks ago, he's hosting that show. So it's possible now that, as the podcast spreads, more populations across the globe really can be inspired to do similar things in their own community. So yeah, I would like to talk about the funding stream, because that's a little unique, I think, to the United States, given how it started, but it doesn't mean that anybody else can't do it. And certainly within the U.S. can certainly access it, right? So yeah, talk about the Ryan White stuff and where you get your money and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are 95% of our funding comes from the Ryan White program. And I'll tell you a little bit about the young man named Ryan White. He was an actual young Caucasian kid that got HIV through a blood transfusion when he was 13 years old. And he was bullied at school. Kids would beat him up, talk about him, and they were afraid. And so his mother finally had to take him out of school. And because there was so much bullying and so much discontent, so much stigma around this little kid trying to go to school, his mother decided to start a nonprofit called Ryan White. And at that time, they were advocacy education nonprofit, where they would talk to people, educate them. You can go to school with my child. If he bumps into you, you're not going to get HIV. But I'm telling you, back in the early 90s, people were just scared stiff of HIV. And so his mother began to advocate and for several years. And then Ryan White died, I believe it was in 1990. So he lived to be 18. And I think I said he got it through a blood transfusion. But after the government saw what a great work she did, they decided soon after his death to pass the Ryan White Care Act, which funded money to different organizations to prevent this disease and, to help those that have HIV and AIDS. So that's how the Ryan White Fund got started. And they fund all the United States and Puerto Rico, different, parts. And so every state gets Ryan White funding. And a lot of the funding is predicated upon the population basis of how much money you get. So we get a pretty good amount for the Ryan White funding in Nevada. So we're small, so we're one of the smaller grantees, but we're still able to do a great work with the money that they give us. So clients served by the Ryan White funding in the United States in the 3 territories is about 530,000 people. Now, there's more people than that with HIV/AIDS, but some of them don't access the service. So that's another thing that we're trying to get a handle on. And this is kind of interesting. So by race and ethnicity, this is really interesting to me. 47% of the people that access Ryan White funding are African Americans. 26.3% are are Caucasian, and 23.2% are Hispanic. And then you have your Asians, they're 1.4%. And Native Americans are 0.05, and multiple races are 0.02, and then 1.4 would be, I already said the Asian population. So it's kind of interesting. The bulk of the population, which is African Americans, and then the bulk, get have the most of the funding from the Ryan White program. Now, I am talking a lot about African Americans, but I want your audience to know that we do not discriminate with our services. We have white, folks in our services, Hispanic people, Asian. So we don't discriminate. Even though we target, we don't discriminate. And that's been one of the things that we really want to reiterate in this.
Appreciate that. And I want to steer back to the disproportionate